there! I'm Squire Callahan Ridgeborn, almost a battle master, always a wizard, and tonight I'm excited to be joined by Wat, a Paragon Scout here in the Rising Winds. Wat, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Wat, can you tell me about how you started Amtgard?
This was around late 2010. Was my first day at Amtgard was in November of 2010, and I found Amtgard because originally I was involved in a local humans versus zombies Nerf war type club. Uh, that we had, and I've got like group photos. We had 400 or 500 people in the city of Louisville that would meet up at Waterfront Park once every month or two with Nerf guns, Nerf swords, etc. And we would play HVZ, which is a type of Nerf war where humans have Nerf guns or balled up socks or foam Nerf swords, and zombies are just people playing tag. If you get tagged, you become a zombie. If you get shot as a zombie, you're stunned for however many seconds. We would vary it, and we would start with hundreds of humans sprawled across this massive park in Louisville. And over the span of a couple hours, playing tag with each other, running out of darts, the game would slowly go from one zombie to 500 zombies, and we would run it back. But one day we had a couple of people show up with, at the time I didn't know what they were, but they were Belagarth flat blade short swords, tower shields, and basically just asked if they could play with those, and we let them. I've never seen those people again. I don't know if they were just driving through town and found us or what, but that, I think seeing that in person and seeing that kind of DIY equipment finally made me think I need to Google Boffer Sports, LARPs. There was a website at the time, and this was like the late GeoCities, Yahoo, or that era of personal websites. There was a website called Shade's LARP List that a lot of old people would be familiar with, and Shade's LARP List had Maddox Keep, the local Louisville Amtgard chapter, on it, and I just showed up, and I got hooked. So I'd never met an Amtgarder, never heard of Amtgard. I walked up myself, and
that sounds like a very unique way of discovering the game. That's super cool. I actually got to play in a Humans vs. Zombies game and had a blast. I wish that was a thing that was in my area, because I would go and do that as well. What can you tell us a fun fact about yourself?
Okay, so I saw this one on your itinerary you sent me, and I'm usually not good at talking about myself. I'm sure nobody is in this situation, but this was on my wall, and I figured it was the easiest thing to talk about. So I have, people in Amtgard are familiar with titles of nobility in Amtgard, and like Lord, Lady, Duke, Archduke, etc. Things you get for being in office. I have a title of nobility from the state of Kentucky.
Like the state of Kentucky, Kentucky? Not our parks out there, but the actual state.
Yes. Most people have heard of this, whether or not they know it's real or that it's actually a thing. People are mostly familiar with Colonel Sanders, the KFC guy, but yeah. I am a Kentucky colonel. I'll hold that closer to the camera. It's a commission by the governor.
Wow. How did you earn that?
And my Kentucky colonel essentially for Amtgard, for developing social communities and furthering the community and social growth of Kentuckians by developing community sporting clubs. Kentucky Colonel Society is basically built on a referral system. I reached out to a friend of mine that I knew was a colonel to try and get one for my dad for an entirely different list of reasons, and they ended up putting in one for me as well for helping cultivate Amtgard in the state of Kentucky, helping various chapters, helping organize the Amtgard club in the Louisville area, and so on. It's a weird title. It's not, most people in Kentucky who are familiar with the Kentucky Colonels assume that people get it for like running into a burning orphanage and rescuing all the babies, or donating money to build some government infrastructure or something. But really, if you further the state of Kentucky as a society in some way, and the right person sees it, you can become a Kentucky colonel, and they start sending you letters and begging for donations. But I got a cool thing.
You are a colonel.
So
that's really cool. That's a very fun fact. I don't know how to transition back to Amtgard from that, because that's just so cool. I have a million follow-up questions. I want to be a colonel, and I don't even live in Kentucky. Okay, back to Amtgard. What is your favorite kind of battle game?
So my favorite battle game, broadly speaking, I prefer node battles. I like having multiple objectives to fight over. I like being able to pivot to a different objective if one isn't going well. I like being able to create my own opportunities to play an objective by being able to switch between them. It creates a more dynamic game field than, say, us fighting over one single objective or defending or attacking one point or having to play like capture the flag. There's a lot more opportunities for unique plays and unique scenarios on the same field at the same time. And on top of that, I have a strong bias toward playing on real terrain. So in the woods or with bunkers, especially in the woods because shade.
Unfortunately, our kingdom site doesn't have a lot of real terrain.
No, and that's been an ongoing thing. The last several event sites, we have mostly played in a plain open grass field with no cover and no, defenses, trees. It's really hard to find a good site like that. Forest Lake, that Battlecry is commonly held at, and a lot of the Midgard events are held at. Forest Lake is a good site for that specific niche, but there, we run into other issues playing in those woods, like yellow jackets, mud, and so on. Honestly, the best event I've ever been to for terrain is a tie between Taldegor Legends, which is played at a paintball site that has forts and bunkers and a 2-story pirate ship that has staircases and gangplanks you can fight up and down. It's a really cool site. There's a Canadian event I try to go to every year called Battle of the Dens, which is on some private property up in Ontario. And they run a 4-hour-long capture the flag game out deep in the woods with trails carved through the woods and big rock formations to fight around and forts they've built in the woods. It's a blast.
That sounds super cool. What was that one called?
Yeah. Battle of the Dens. It's hosted by Nine Blades in Sudbury, Ontario every year. So from Louisville, Kentucky, it's about a 15-hour drive, but I've made it 3 times now, and I've loved every time I've gone.
That sounds super cool. What made you start playing Scout?
So Scout was my first amp card class, and I started playing it in version 7. Honestly, Scout was a miserable class to play in version 7, so I would not have recommended it at the time. The culture at the time, if you're playing in the Rising Winds at most chapters in the Rising Winds, they're just going to tell you to play the level you know. If you're only a level 1 Scout on the Orc, but you know how to play the whole class, they're not going to mind if you just play the class. It's easier to balance a team of players if you know everybody's level 6. In my experience, at least, you play level 6. But 2010, I worked through level 1 Scout, level 2 Scout, level 3 Scout in a version 7, which had awful leveling. 13 credits per level all the way up. It didn't 4 credits level 2, 12 credits level 3, so on. It didn't do that. It was 13 credits a level. And that was rough. Scout in version 7 was a peasant with throwies until like level 3 or 4. My park didn't have many scouts. That was basically why I picked it. In version 8, in the modern era of Amcard, I guess, I switched to Scout after playing Druid for ages and just wanting a change that would still allow me to use a crossbow and have a variety of options at my disposal for dealing with threats on the field. But I wanted something different than I was playing with Druid.
When you made that switch, what made you fall back in love with Scout and really want to finish the Paragon journey for that?
So Scout has been second class for a long time. Version 7, Scout was meh. A lot of classes were meh, second tier in version 7, but that's a whole nother discussion. Version 8 Scout didn't really come into its own until it was tweaked to have the chargeable dispel magic that they added to it. And I think that made a big change in how the class can be played on the field that really made me feel comfortable going back to it and feeling like I could be effective. But I can get into the tactics of how I play Scout in a separate conversation. But really, it was that change when they finally got a sustainable dispel magic. The change process that Scout went through over the years, they gave it a dispel magic like once per refresh. And then eventually they made it chargeable, and I think also shortened its dispel charge. It used to be charge times 10. Now it's charge times 5.
Which is
not
as good as Wizards, but still pretty okay.
No, and it's one of those spells that I can talk about. You don't actually have to cast it to benefit from having it. There's a whole strategy you can build around things like that.
Well, we can talk about that when we get into the strategy portion. So what about Scout is unique? What makes it different from all the other classes out there?
So for me, Scout is the melee class that excels with a crossbow, and also of the bow classes, it is the one that has the most armor and the most sustainable source of armor. What I mean by sustainable is the armor being worn armor comes back every single time I respawn. It's not a benefit you get running Druid At least you can to an extent, but you run out of steam as you run out of per refresh armors. But then to be a bow user and to have 3 points of armor at my disposal, I think is the biggest thing for Scout, and its ability to adapt to various threats in a sustainable way is what makes it unique. Adapting to threats sustainably is that its adaptive protections are per life. Its armor comes back every single life. Its heal and its release and its tracking are per life. Scout may not have a powerful or heavy set of abilities in terms of what it can dish out, but it does have those abilities sustainably.
So while it might not be able to pack as heavy a punch, it can continue punching a lot longer.
Yes.
Speaking of Scout, it's time to scout out some good deals with today's sponsor. Today we're sponsored by CadeMade. Whether you're looking for equipment to beat people up in your public park, or commissioning a purple applique tunic that'll make the cutie at the Bardic finally notice you, CadeMade has you covered. So check out CadeMade when you have some time. Show them some love for sponsoring the channel. Back to our interview questions. Are there any ways that Scout overlaps with some of the other classes? Are there any skills that Scout has that are transferable in or out of it?
Scout is a mentality class and a positioning class to me, but you can find carryover in classes like Assassin and Druid, I think. I find a lot of bow users will play Scout when they should be playing Archer, or will play Scout when they probably should be playing Druid, but that's not for me to tell them how to play the game. But I think if you are a longer ranged archer, if you are a backline archer, you probably benefit more from firing specialty arrows. That's a bit of a pessimistic outlook. I think there is overlap anywhere you can reapply the principles, but being an off tank, which I can go into in detail later, is a difficult thing to do without a certain set of tools in your belt. And I think that in particular is what makes Scout unique. And really, there are a lot of battle games where I feel like I don't know what's going to be best in terms of my kit or in terms of what I should be playing or for the scenario. And I'll walk up to my team wearing 3 to 4 points of armor and just say, guys, what sash do you want me to put on? And it could be Scout, it could be Barbar, it could be Pally, it could be Warrior, whatever. And we'll talk it out and I'll put the sash on. And so armored classes, to me, there's a lot of overlap. The root of it being you have armor that comes back every time you respawn.
I want to follow up on that with a sort of a breakout question. You said that sometimes people play a Scout with a bow when they should be playing Archer. What is the breaking point? When do you think people should be playing Scout? Why should people who are doing bow or crossbow things be playing Scout over Archer?
So it's tough. At the end of the day, people are going to play the class that they want to play, and they're going to have the abilities that they want to use. But when it comes to being the most effective player on the field that you can do with your abilities and with your positioning and things like that, if you are more to a backline than a front line and you are using a standard bow and standard arrows, you're probably going to be better off using specialty arrows as an archer. If you play in a team setting where you have a lot of battery bards, or you have a wizard that likes to buy enchantments and really wants to give void touch to somebody, you're going to be better off playing archer, because you're going to be able to do more with your arrows from the back line and do so more sustainably via teamwork than you would be able to do shooting standard arrows from anywhere as a scout in the back line. Scout to me is a frontline or a skirmisher sideline class, and the survivability of a frontliner that has to hold with both hands their arrow launcher of choice, they're at a disadvantage.
Talking about that flanking in the back line, which roles does Scout fill the best?
So Scout, in my mind, is an off tank. Most people who play video games are familiar with the concepts of tank support and DPS. Tanks exist to soak damage. DPS, damage per second, exists to deal damage. And supports keep them afloat, keep them alive, work from the back, things like that. These are broad definitions, and maybe I'm not perfect with them, but an off tank is an example of a class that supports a main tank and peels for the backline. So instead of... Scout is not the class that can survive the brunt of the damage, and Scout is not the class that can create space and create holes in the enemy line to break through. But Scout is a class that has sufficient, sustainable armor that it can survive in a frontline environment and be, in the case of a crossbow user, the furthest forward bow user. And also, Scout exists. I mentioned Scout is a mentalist sort of class. Scout exists in a space where, because it is a class that can survive on the front line with a dispel magic, with a hold person, with a crossbow in hand, it can disrupt enemy strategies and live to tell it, and it can assist the tank in surviving some of the harsher encounters. Basically, what I'm saying is that Scout is a class that is a pain in the butt to deal with for the enemy, and I can probably better articulate that with a screen share. I pulled up MS Paint here, and I've doodled out a very common sight in any mid to large battle game. You have two teams here. These 4 blanks over here are just things I copy and paste from, but you have 2 teams here. They're fighting back and forth, and say the line in the sand that we're fighting over is basically right across here, right? So this team is facing this way, and this team is facing this way. They're fighting it out. They're duking it out. This should be a pretty common scenario. You've got, think of these as sash colors. So you got your warriors here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you got your warriors here in the purple. They're at the front line. They're dealing damage. They're whacking at each other. They're looking for gaps. They're poking holes. They're getting frozen. They've got spellcasters in the back line behind them. The red healer here maybe is repeatedly releasing and mending this warrior. Here's a wizard. This is probably Callahan. But you have your tanks. You have your semi-tanks. Like you've got an AP here. You got a paladin here. They're duking it out. You have a line of armor in the front. You have casters keeping that armor afloat, screaming over each other's shoulders. And you've got some other things here. You got the aforementioned backline archer class that's looking for opportunities and firing from 20, 30 feet back from the enemy, but taking shots that just have to land with engulfing effects like pinning arrow, suppression arrow, etc. Your most survivable classes are up front. They're getting supported. They're duking it out. In green right here is where I want to be as a scout on my team. I'm right next to a tank. I am also passive defense for, there's a monk here that's looking for opportunities and looking for a flanking run. There's a healer right here that's mainly supporting the tank, but can probably rescue me if needed. But the big thing about my position is that it's a really bad idea for an archer to be in my position. It's a really bad idea for an assassin to be in my position. Those classes lack the armor to survive duking out up front, and they lack tools that really benefit them in a frontline space, because archers' abilities, their engulfing arrows, are just as effective from 60 feet back as they are from 6 feet. Right. They should be as far back as possible where they can land shots and do their work. The assassin, if they're in the front line and duking it out, they're just going to die. They don't have a shield. They have slightly less armor than the scout. They should be over here in the open, trying to find entries, trying to find a way around the flank, etc. But the scout can sit right here and hang out with the warrior and watch who the warrior and paladin here are fighting. And maybe this shifts around. Maybe the warrior's here and the scout and warrior switch places, but this is all theoretical, so we can skip that. The big thing here is that because I have the survivability that I mentioned, and I have the toolkit that's sustainable that I mentioned, I am the furthest forward class that can basically point a crossbow maybe 5 to 10 feet in front of me and delete melee weapons that are actively engaging with people on my team. So if there's, right there is a warrior and he's got a big pole, and you back here in the back land a dispel on him, all I have to do is point and click with the crossbow and his polearm's gone.
Yeah.
Because you've taken away his harden. And it is monumentally easy to take a flat shooting weapon like a crossbow and just click it in the direction of a polearm and delete a polearm when I'm only maybe 5 to 10 feet from him. Yeah. In the same situation, being up here, I'm probably within 20 feet of their wizard. And if their whole team starts to advance into us for whatever reason, that's a juicy opportunity for me to land a quick hull person on this guy, and he gets left behind by his team while he has to release himself, or, well, hopefully release himself or get a teammate to fix it. But that's picking away their support as they're trying to push. And I'm in range to do that from the beginning. I don't have to, if you're a wizard or if you're any spellcaster, you have to get up, get close to get in 20 foot of range and often expose yourself to land some of the spells you need to land if you are targeting their back line up here. I'm in range from the start. On top of that, because I mentioned that I run with a crossbow, I can still have a melee weapon in my offhand. Or I can still have my small shield strapped to one arm and my melee weapon in that offhand while firing the crossbow with the primary hand. So I have my defense, I have my melee offense, I have my ranged attacks, and I have my ranged spells without really sacrificing any of those enough that it presents as a weakness to the other team. I mean, sure, it's not perfect to have all of those things at the same time, but from the other team's perspective, I'm a pain in the butt and I'm difficult to deal with. I'm not going to be the one scoring the objective because I don't have the damage per second to push through, or I don't have the clutch abilities that will kill 2 or 3 players and plow through, but I am a concrete barrier on the road, and nobody gets to go until I'm dealt with. And the big thing about being that far forward, a lot of people, I'll see a lot of scouts, and maybe there's no right or wrong answer to this, but I like to not cast adaptive protection on myself until I see the first thing that actually targets me. I've noticed that in my experience, I don't get cast on a lot when it comes to command spells, when it comes to death spells, when I'm on the front line like that. I think people assume that I'm going to pick a common adaptive protection like command and just not use it. But then it's often bad spell economy to burn a kill spell on a scout. It's better to take away my tank with a kill spell somehow, and then I'm not a good tank, so the line probably falters. But I digress. The thing with Scout that I really do want to focus on is that it's a pain in the ass to deal with. And knowing that you can carry that presence, just by being here and having the abilities that you have, druids are not going to want to deal with it. And I've been on the other side of this as playing druid for years also. The druid can carry a big stack of enchantments. Let's say the scout is not in the picture, right? Maybe this is the front line that this druid over here is facing up against. He's got warriors, he's got an AP, he's got pallies, and then he's got a back line, right? This druid is enchanted all the way up. They're an avatar of nature. They have a stack of 4 enchantments. They've got a bouquet of strips. They have magic armor. They have abilities. They have magic armor. They have extra damage. They have troll blood. They have all of their spells. They have an ice ball charged. They feel like a god. When they're engaging with this front line, they can take hits and mend themselves. They can throw ice balls from up front. Their biggest worry is the midline spellcasters getting up here and casting Dispel. And normally, if you're a very aware druid, you can see when a caster has realized that you're a threat and ran up and tries to Dispel you, and you're going to scurry off, right? So the thing with having the scout there is that this druid is just gonna find somewhere else to play. Because the druid, again, I'm the furthest one forward, and I have the survivability to be on the front line. I have a Dispel that has, with a 20-foot range, that 20-foot range may look like this for the healer, or this for the wizard, but it's this for the scout.
So you can get those dispels a lot deeper into their line.
I could dispel the void touched wizard without additional exposure to myself. Whereas if you're down here, Callahan, if you needed to get up here and cast, you might be able to reach into the backline, but you're exposing yourself, and you might be able to take 1 shot or 2 shots before you've lost your armor and you're dead, or you need to retreat.
Yeah.
I can soak damage, and I can soak damage sustainably on every single life. And having these tools, again, I've mentioned that this is a spell that you don't really have to cast. Druids know you have it, and they know you have it all the time. It's not something that maybe the wizard didn't purchase dispels, or maybe the healer or other druid, I don't know why, but maybe they didn't buy dispels. Maybe they didn't think they would deal with an enchantment stacked druid or a summoner on the other team that's just dispensing them like candy. But the scout always has it. And in situations where the scout always has it, that druid is going to find somewhere else to play if he wants to keep his enchantments.
Yeah.
So
You
you
can move
encounter
people
situations.
around without having to actually do anything.
Correct. And you see the same thing sometimes with assassins. Tracking is per life, it's quickly chargeable, it's very it's very easy to use. And I don't have to have a free hand to cast it. So any encounter with me is going to remove them from their insubstantial state. Druids and assassins, if they want to survive and they want to keep what they're doing, they're going to find plays elsewhere that let them harass other people on my team and not have to deal with me.
I just checked, and Scout's Dispel Magic is also an EX ability. So you don't have to have a free hand for your Dispel either.
No, sir. So I can be while fighting you.
Huh.
So if I engage with the druid and the druid has, I can take a couple of hits, but I can make sure their dispels are gone. And, maybe maybe they're a better fighter. Maybe their enchantments will allow them to deal with me quickly, but that's a greater risk to them and their survivability and their economic usage of their enchantments than it is for them to just go somewhere else and fight someone else.
Yeah.
And that sort of passive effect on the mental game that you get from playing Scout is going to help everybody in a bubble around you.
You get a whole area of influence then.
Yep. So multiple lanes, if you're in a bridge battle with multiple lanes, if you're in a big field with walls, you can pretty much influence with your presence. And, there is some level of general competence with the class that I assume is needed for people to perceive you as this threat. But the first time someone gets tracked out by a scout, or the first time someone gets dispel yelled at them by a scout, they're probably going to pick another lane or another bridge to try their same tactics on. But even then, if the warrior dies, if the paladin dies, if any of the primary tanks die, I can probably keep my position long enough for someone at the back line to rescue those players and get them back up into fighting. But again, that's not because I have great damage or great armor. It's because I'm a pain in the butt to deal with and I can disrupt enemy plays from the front line.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Also, something I love to do that annoys the crap out of people is, and maybe this is just personal satisfaction and not like a clutch play, but let me clear this out and then bring that back. Let's say we have double this field.
Ooh,
right?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm this guy over here on the left. Right? Okay, so this is something that only I think a scout can really do. But let's say this AP's got a shield. This druid's got his little small shield. This warrior's got this big shield here. This guy's got a shield. And I'm assuming, there's an advantageous angle here because I'm a lefty, and these are all righties, but you could pull this off in any way as long as you get this positioning right. But I drew these lines in a particular little position for this. The shield's on the left hand here. Most people are righties. I'm a crossbow, and I'm a scout, so I can uniquely be on the front line. That means I can be on the front line and have the survivability to look for shots that allow me to shoot right into the pocket across here. And worst case scenario, I'm hitting their sword, but I'm aiming inside their blocking surface.
Yeah.
And you can't do that from a backline position.
No.
Maybe sometimes, but not with as much advantage as you can by firing deep across the fighting line. So I can get assists on people that are way down the line in a big battle from my unique position that I am uniquely spec'd to carve out for myself.
Okay.
What do you think?
I kind of want to play Scout now.
It's so, all of this advice also is predicated on playing a scout that has all of their equipment.
Sure.
Full body, 3 points of armor. I can run a small shield, a crossbow, and a long sword in the shield hand. I can drop the crossbow and switch to full melee very quickly, or I can block myself while firing. If you remove any of the elements that make Scout Scout,
Hmm.
its position in the meta falls apart very quickly. If I don't have the crossbow, I can't make a lot of those advantageous plays. I can't delete weapons. I can't take advantageous shots at the enemy's backline from my forward position. If you take away the armor, I've lost my survivability.
The durability and survivability of Scout has really created a unique position for it to be that very frontline threat with the crossbow and being able to use that dispel deep into the enemy field. That seems like a really unique position that only Scout can occupy.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely walking a very fine line.
what kind of crossbow are you using?
So my primary crossbow is unfortunately one that's not made anymore. It is a Daisy Youth Archery 4003. It is a discontinued model of Daisy crossbow. I have also seen a few different crossbows from Bear Archery. One in particular that people seem to have pretty good luck with is the Bear Archery Desire XL. It's about a $70 to $80 pistol crossbow that the cocking lever is built into the stock at the back. That's probably the best off-the-shelf crossbow you can buy currently. I'm in a place with the Daisy Youth Archery crossbow where I have 3 of them and 2 of them are for parts. So clock's ticking on that. If I had to switch, I would go to the Bear Archery Desire XL. And you can pop it apart when you receive it and file away some of like the extra safeties and remove some of the parts on it to make it more ergonomic for LARP battle gaming and rapid firing. I recommend doing that, but you know, these these products are all made in China, and parts for them can be hard to get when they do break. Often, like in my situation, I have 3 of them, and I have one good working crossbow at the moment, and I've got a bin of spare parts for it. So, a lot of people I've seen will also make their own. There's a couple I've seen that are really good, but also it's when people are making DIY crossbows, the principles are easy to pull off, but making something that shoots straight every time is really difficult in my experience. I don't bother with it. I would rather modify something off the shelf.
What Scout ability do you like the best?
I think Dispel Magic creates the most opportunities for me, even when I don't successfully land it. If I'm dealing with a small party or a skirmish of some sort, I can threaten with the dispel, and some people will just walk off. Druids with 5 enchantments, all of their power is in their enchantments.
Mm-hmm.
When in that engagement, I mean, maybe they have. I mean, okay, Druid has good spells. I'm not saying that, but nobody wants to walk into a fight and just have their pants be pulled down, and an armored player being able to dispel you. That's kind of what that feels like. So if I yell at a scout and say the dispel incant twice, and they turn tail and find a different place to fight, I didn't have to use the spell, but they're gone. I could say the same thing for a warrior that's carrying Harden and Ancestral Armor. I could say the same thing for an anti-paladin that's got their Flame Blade and they don't want to lose it yet, or they want to be able to use it quickly, or another scout that's got a stack of enchantments from someone on their team. People don't want to lose that stuff to one spell, and they will find somewhere else to use it if they can't use it against you. So I get to control an environment by threatening with a spell that I may not even have to actually cast. And Dispel gives me that.
What Scout ability do you like the least?
I get the least utility out of Evolution. Evolution has been a struggle for me to use because I can't, even on a kingdom field as large as the Rising Winds, where we can have 50 on 50 battle games at a cold weather event, I can't depend on getting enchantments from somebody on my team. Maybe they don't buy them. Maybe we don't have a summoner. Maybe we don't have a warder. But I can usually get one really good enchantment. A lot of the enchantments people try to give out are magic armor, and I'm already wearing full coverage for my class.
Right.
And I think that in my mind, if I'm playing Scout, I want cheap, sustainable enchantments. Like I want poison, or I want, which is per life for druids. I want blessing against wounds, which is per life for healers. And I want those every life that I can muster if I can get their attention. Because that gives me a little extra nudge toward either damage or survivability, but it's not going to draw enough attention to me that I get dispelled.
Right. Because no one dispels a poison.
No, it's bad spell usage. You're better off doing something else to me.
Right.
And maybe if I've got my adaptive protection, but yeah, I want cheap enchantments, and it's cool when I can get two cheap enchantments because I have evolution, but it's rare to actually get that from someone without planning well in advance that they're gonna pump enchantments onto me.
So earlier you said that a lot of times you won't use your capstone ability, that adaptive protection, until someone has started to cast on you. Are you trying to like cast that faster than them?
No, I just want to know what people are actually trying to land on me.
Oh, you're eating that first spell and then putting it on.
Yes. And maybe the thing with Scout is it has a lot of per life abilities and it's a frontliner. In my mind, it's okay for me to die. I want my per lives back. I only want cheap enchantments. For my mental game, I only want cheap enchantments that are typically per life. It's okay for me to die, go back, collect my arrows, collect my throwies if I have them, and come back to life with all my armor and everything back. That's good for me. I think, you want to keep your casters alive and yelling. You want to keep your barbarians and warriors alive and either dealing or soaking damage. The scout can die. Helps me figure out what I need to prioritize for the next life's adaptive protection. And then on that life, if something else lands, it helps me gauge what changes I need to make. Because if I'm totally fine with dying often, since I'm totally fine with it dying often, because it gets me those things back, it lets me adapt. And adapt I will, because I'm paying attention to who is fighting in my lane or fighting on my side of the field or aggressing against me often and the kinds of spells they're using. If I am encountering a warlock every single time I come to life and choose a certain path in the game field, I'm taking AP death. Or AP flame, one of the two. If I encounter a bard, AP command. If there's a druid if there's a whole bunch of spellcasters that are throwing ice balls, I'm AP subdual. But that first time out, I'm not worried about it. I might pick something that seems obvious, but I'm not going to overthink it.
Can you tell me a little bit more about your weapon build out? Like I know you said you do your crossbow. Are you using a sling with that at all? Like how
I've messed around with slings and swivels and harnesses and things like that. My Paragon Druid sash that Duriel built me ages ago is actually like a 3-point harness that can hold the crossbow when I drop it, but that's a Druid sash. We're talking about Scout. I have a hip quiver that I use for crossbow bolts, and oftentimes I will just stick the crossbow in the quiver stock first, or I will drop it a few feet behind me on the line if I'm going to dive in with melee, or I will just drop it and not worry about it all that much. I've never had a string failure on a crossbow. I've never had a limb be damaged on a crossbow. I've really never had any big concerns with just dropping the crossbow and forgetting about where it is. But it's also not as big of a issue as dropping a more expensive, more powerful recurve bow on the ground.
Okay.
But also, I have 2 parts crossbows for a reason. Things do break. I would like a harness, but I struggle with the ergonomics of them. The harness would need to allow me to toss it over a shoulder onto my back or swing it around under my arm to my back so that it's entirely out of the way for me to sword and shield or 2 sword fight someone. Any harness that is like a typical rifle harness that lets a rifle sit across your chest is in the way for melee fighting. I would rather drop the bow.
With the crossbows, is there any special maintenance you do for those?
I definitely serve my string with hockey tape. So I again may not be the best person to talk to about that, but it's never failed me. It fires straight every time. I have a string that's been on the same bow for probably too long. The big thing that fails on the Daisy Youth Archery crossbow is the part of the bow. Say if this is the stock and handle of the bow, and my finger is the limb.
Mm-hmm.
There is a screw that tightens in through the nose of the crossbow that holds the limb on the front of the stock. That screw always backs out.
So you have to be checking that in between games?
At least after each event. The first crossbow I had break. That screw had loosened out enough that the little rubber and metal pad that the screw presses onto the bow itself fell out.
Oh no.
And I just had a bow that was flopping side to side in the handle of the crossbow. And if I tightened that screw back without that little pad in there, the screw itself would dig into the fiberglass bow, and that would be dangerous. It would cause cracking.
That's no good.
So that went in the parts bin, and I learned to keep tabs on that particular screw. Captain Nam in Grim Garrison uses the same crossbow, and he's had the same problem. been back and forth a lot trying to figure out a way to improvise a new pad for that spot, but we just got to be diligent.
How can other classes best support Scout?
Again, so I'm a class that doesn't often break through a fighting line, and I don't often soak a lot of damage, but keep me patched up and give me your cheap one-off or sustainable enchantments, in my mind, at least.
If you were going to get one of those more expensive enchantments, which enchantment would you be looking for?
Ooh.
Like,
I think I want Phoenix Tears because Phoenix Tears is going to increase my survivability and give me my armor back each time I come up. It's going to, and that extra enchantment is considered persistent as long as Phoenix Tears is present.
So does that enchantment then take your enchantment count up to 3 potentially?
It can, yes. And also my adaptive protection does not count towards that limit, so I could easily end up with 4 enchantments without having to beg for an attuned or an essence graft. So I could have the Phoenix Tears and also have a Blessing Against Wounds. Protection from projectiles would be rad on top of that. I don't think, and again, I don't think I need a Pro Mag. I don't think I need Enlightened Soul or anything like that. I think it's okay for me to receive a lot of that kind of damage. I would rather just have someone behind me with releases and they be Johnny on the spot with them. Mm-hmm. But Phoenix Tears increases my survivability. And I think stacked cheap blessings on top of that, whether they're adaptive blessing, adaptive protection, blessing against harm, etc., those lower level ones with it, I think I'm golden.
I want to talk about the weaknesses of Scout. What is Scout weak to?
The big thing that stands out for me with Scout is crushing breaking weapons. My priority in a frontline position is to make sure that I'm not the victim of crushing breaking weapons. So I'm crossbow shooting the barbarian with a pole or the AP with a pole. It's hard to deal with warriors with poles, but crushing breaking weapons chew me up. They'll get rid of my small shield. They'll one hit my armor to 0. I don't have a good counter for that unless I can shoot their weapon.
So that's how you have developed a strategy to overcome that, is by shooting their weapon.
Yeah, and again, it's not the best, but it's all I've got.
How many arrows or crossbow bolts are you taking onto the?
Maybe a dozen in longer games. Basically, the hip quiver that I use is just a fabric pouch that is probably 18 inches, 20 inches deep.
Okay.
It probably holds about a dozen arrows, and I'll fire them, die, collect them, rinse and repeat. And if I'm generally skirmishing in the same space and holding a position, as the fighting line carries back and forth across the field, I can generally collect my own arrows because I'm largely shooting in a pretty small space.
Right. You're not the archer shooting 60 feet away. You're in that like 10 to 15 foot range.
Yeah. I've had my own crossbow bolts bounce back to me, and I'll just fire them again.
This is something that is like the wizarding dream, is to bounce the ice ball off their shield so hard that you can catch it and then recast it.
Yeah. I've done that once with a crossbow bolt. I'll never be able to do it again.
Catch it. I've got them to bounce back before, but I've never been able to catch the ball out of the air bouncing off of someone's shield.
The worry is, so with ice balls, at least it procs on the first thing it hits, and that's it. The bouncing arrow can do damage back at me.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. You gotta be careful.
And maybe not everyone would. I would take it, and I've taken dumb stuff like that before, but I'd be real sad if somebody did that and didn't take their own hit back at them.
So I have a couple other questions I wanted to ask. How does Scout play differently on a kingdom field versus a park field?
Scout is definitely a class that benefits greatly from being in a large group and having someone else that basically that tank battle buddy and then support behind it. Scout is always hard to deal with on any field in my mind, but it doesn't shine in a park battle game. I guess in terms of the kinds of people and classes you see in park battle games, you don't always see people playing at 100% of their potential unless they're a spellcaster. Mm-hmm. I'm bad about this, and I know some people are bad about this, but park days can be lazy days. And also they can be small days, so like maybe a barony-sized battle game could be 5-on-5, 7-on-7, where the scout doesn't have the teamwork to affect plays well. I mean, the scout is still hard to deal with if it's a defender, and it's still a versatile class, but it sits middle of the pack when it's on its own, and it's hard to shine in a class like that unless you're in an environment where 3 points of armor and a crossbow and a sword makes you the biggest fish in a small pond. But I think you can run into that with any class.
Yeah, that's something that I've seen. Like if you're if you've got a 10-person battle game and you're the only one wearing armor, that makes you the threat that everyone has to worry about, even if you're only a middling swordsman.
Yeah, and often like if you're those 5-on-5 class games can be the game where the team that has the evoker wins because they can score before he runs out of spell balls. And nobody on the other team has greater release, so the game's
It's
tilted at
really
that
hard to
point.
balance those small. What do you think the minimum gear is required to successfully play Scout?
I will preach 100% class gear for Scout to make it exactly what it needs to be, but I think there's a lot of effectiveness. If you're a good melee fighter and you know your enchantments and you can get those enchantments, then you can push Scout into a harder skirmisher role. You can push Scout into a DPS role. You can rebuild Scout's versatility with enchantments and enchantment plays. But in my experience, it's hard to get that.
So, what does that idealized battle kit look like for a Scout?
For me, I run a strap shield that is a rouleau triangle. It's kind of a soft, rounded edge triangle.
Mm-hmm.
That shape, the arrow shows the direction my hand is facing. So I have a smaller point at the face of the arrow. I can hold a sword, and the shield is not in the way of me using the sword on that hand.
Okay.
But it's still strapped to my forearm like any traditional strap shield would. And that soft triangle shape on my body still gives me a little bit of hip coverage and still covers my shoulder despite it being a small shield. So I run that. I have a very light long sword that's not a max long. There's no good way to make a light max long sword in my mind. I have a 42-inch longsword, a short or maybe a second long, and a backup weapon on the belt. So shield, crossbow, 2 melee weapons, and 3 points of armor on every hit location. That's my bare minimum. I have to have all those things for me to feel good as a scout. If I drop the crossbow, I'm begging for enchantments on my team to convert myself into a more melee role. Or if I lose the shield, I need something, again, I need to go make up for that with enchantments like ancestral armor, or I need to find a different role or a different position on the field to work.
Have you done anything with the new archetypes that just came out?
So up to this point, I've broadly been discussing the class of Scout with its primary build type in mind. No Apex, no Hunter, because that is relatively close to how Scout has been for ages, is its base build. That's how I've largely been playing it. I think Hunter could fix a lot of the issues that Scout sees at the park level. And in an environment where you don't have a lot of DPS, I think Hunter is a sufficient band-aid for not having that DPS on your team. But I don't like giving up shields in a class that doesn't have a whole lot of defense. And I don't like using a two-handed weapon like great weapons and a very cumbersome kit that javelins provide. I think it's difficult to run a class with limited defense across the board and weapons that are very difficult to carry and difficult to equip sustainably. With a standard scout, I can keep the shield strapped to my hand and still fire the crossbow. I can keep the arrows and the crossbow in a hip quiver easily. Javelins take up a lot more space. But as mentioned, a lot of Scout's weaknesses become more apparent in smaller games, and Hunter probably fixed that pretty well.
How do you feel about the Apex archetype, where you gain mutation and adaptive blessing, but you lose evolution, whole person, pinning arrow, and adaptive protection?
It's a rough one. In the way that I view Scout, it's a rough one. I'm sure somebody has a better approach to it than I would, but the thing with Scout is that I'm at the front line, so I'm also at risk of being dispelled. Mutation gets me a persistent enchantment, but that persistence may run out once people realize they're encountering me with it over and over and over again. In my experience, where it's difficult to get scout enchantments without significant planning on your team, it can be difficult to make sure that even with persistent enchantments, it can be difficult to make sure that those enchantments keep coming. And I don't want to make sacrifices for something that wouldn't be as sustainable as a primary scout build.
Coming out of the archetypes a little bit, I want to transition over and talk about the culture of paragons here in the Rising Winds. Here in the Rising Winds, we have a paragon board. These are people that are all paragons. They're discussing potential paragons. What is something a scout player can do to stand out to the paragon board?
It's difficult because a lot of the wisdom that has come out of the circle of paragons to get people to stand out is the paragons will tell you that you need to be annoying the crap out of other paragons. People have limited attention spans. People have limited memory, when the adrenaline's going, when they're playing in a game. But if you're annoying the crap out of them in that moment, you're going to stand out to them. They tell you things like that, and that sounds reasonable. But it's difficult to do scout in a way that gets under their skin, unless you're really good at fighting, where you can overcome scout's deficiencies in melee combat compared to other DPS classes. But you can do that with any class. With scout, you need to get paragons to realize that you're playing mental games, that you're positioning yourself between the assassins and where they want to be repeatedly, that you're positioning yourself between druids and threatening them with dispels until they go away. It needs to be clear to a good number of people that you're commanding your little bubble on the field and that you have the survivability and skills to do that to the point that you're a pain in the butt for them. It's hard to get someone to realize that they're being steered. A lot of people feel like, their mental computer when they're in the game field, they're like, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go this way. It's going to probably take those paragons noticing that they're avoiding you every time. And that's difficult.
What advice would you give someone who's starting out as a level 1 scout?
Honestly, I hope that this is your second class. If you're starting scout from level 1, I hope this is your second class. I hope you've leveled something else that you can play at 6th level and you can be a strong contributor in a battle gaming space so that you have that experience and you have that option to fall back to, because level 1 scout, if you have to play your levels, is rough. Especially if you're playing this class for the first time and you don't already have all of the gear. If you're playing scout with a sword and a small shield, 2 trackings, and that's it, you will have the best experience if your park does multi-bridge battles or battles with pits on the field, like holes that your team has to fight around, because that gives you the best experience as a scout is using tracking on an assassin when they're over a pit and you Wile E. Coyote them into the hole. Makes my whole month when that happens.
That sounds amazing.
It's great. Also, that's basically all you're going to be able to do as a level 1 scout. So I guess, if you have no assassins on your field, play a different class while you're leveling up scout. If you have assassins on your field, practice making them have a bad day. Lower level scout is rough. Lower level any melee class is rough, but lower level scout with minimal gear is a tough one.
What advice would you give someone that wants to go from being a level 6 scout to a Paragon Scout?
Man, it feels like it takes more time than effort and talent. The time in that regard, I think, can be overcome. I say that in reference specifically to odd classes like Scout. It takes time for people to realize that you have an answer to everything they try against you and that you're a pain in their butt. If the biggest impact you have on them is that they're going somewhere else, like I mentioned, you don't stand out like the wizard that blows them up every other life, or you don't stand out like the bard that's going to fix them every 10 seconds from their back line as a support for them. You don't stand out like the archer that is repeatedly suppression arrowing them and making them have a bad time. But Scout is an anchor on the front line. I think as more people learn how to play Scout and play its mental games, they're going to start seeing the effect that Scouts have when they take up certain positions like that. And it's going to be easier to track.
Have you ever taken an apprentice?
I have not. Battle game coaching and battle game advice has been something I haven't had a lot of time for. I put a lot of effort into my Amcard chapter. I'm currently monarch of it. I've been playing Amcard for almost 15 years now, and I think I've spent more than 10 of those years in some Amcard office. I've only paid dues a handful of times just because I haven't needed to. So my time is eaten up by boffer making, chapter administration. I don't get a lot of time to talk shop. I don't get a lot of time to present myself as someone that can give out advice. So it's been difficult to try and build apprenticeships and things like that. But I'd like to try and figure that out.
Is that something you'd be open to if someone saw this and said, hey, I want to learn to scout like Wat?
Yeah, I'd love to. If anybody wants to hit me up with questions or tactics they want to go over, builds, we can talk about arrow construction. We can talk about crossbow shopping. We can talk about modifications to crossbows. We can go over enchantment stacks if that's something they're into, things they've tried, what works and what doesn't. I'm here for all of it.
So what are you working on now?
I just started a second term as monarch for Stormbridge, and we're currently trying to sort out some parks department related headaches so that we can do Come Try LARP promotional efforts. So a lot of my energy right now is spent trying to sort out things for my home chapter and make sure that we can keep growing. We're phenomenal duchy nowadays. But if you're not promoting, you're dying. So I get real sweaty about competition around Bridge Wars, but otherwise I'm just trying to have fun and trying to make sure that I've got a big group to play with every weekend.
Speaking of those big Bridge Wars types events, I know you do a lot of vending. Is it okay for people to come up and talk to you about Scout things at those events?
Oh yeah, and honestly, so this past event was the first time that we had really tried to like have a proper booth with a table and all the inventory and all the extra items for sale, and I think we flew too close to the sun on that one. I would like my core event experience to be playing and hanging out and socializing and, having a good time, and I just happen to have all the vending stuff in camp or walking around with me with a wagon occasionally. I don't want it to dominate my whole experience. So I would love to talk about battle gaming more.
Do you have any final advice before we let you go?
Honestly, talk to your teammates, set expectations, communicate to the people that you're playing alongside to let them know what you're going to be trying to do, what you'd like to do, but you need help with, or what your limitations are. In my diagrams I laid out in MS Paint earlier, if that warrior doesn't know that I'm off tanking for him, he may try to charge in rather than hold the line, and he's just going to die, but I'm not going to follow him in. That's not my job. If the healer behind me doesn't know that I'm just trying to stand there and soak hits, they may not be fixing me. If the archer behind me doesn't know that I'm going to try to dispel that druid, they're not going to know to shoot the druid as soon as his enchantments are gone. Setting expectations and coming up with simple strategies that you and one other player on your team can work together on in the moment can create opportunities that your whole team can capitalize on. You have to communicate those to your teammates, even if they're strangers. And sometimes that happens on the field in the moment. Sometimes it needs to happen when you're getting split up into groups, but it has to start somewhere.
We've come to the end of our interview with Sir Wat, a Paragon Scout. Wat, thank you so much for being here and coming on the show. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. You gave us a lot to think about. If you, the viewer, have made it all the way to the end of this video, please subscribe for more battle gaming content and leave a comment down in the comment section. Maybe you have a question for Wat or you got something particularly good out of this episode. Let us know so we can provide you with more of the content you're looking for. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.